It is evident that this terrible mystery is inexplicable, that is, absurd only because the absurd admits of no explanation. It is evident that whoever finds it essential to his happiness in life must renounce his reason and return, if he can, to naive, blind, stupid faith. To repeat with Tertullianus and all sincere believers these words, which sum up the very quintessence of theology: Credo quia absurdum. Then all discussion ceases and nothing remains but the triumphant stupidity of faith. But immediately there arises another question. How comes an intelligent and well-informed man ever feel the need of believing in this mystery? Nothing is more natural than the belief in God, the Creator, Regulator, Judge, Master, Curser, Saviour, and Benefactor of the world should still prevail among people, especially in the rural districts where it is more widespread than among the proletariat of the cities. The people, unfortunately, are still very ignorant and are kept in ignorance by the systemic efforts of all the governments, who consider this ignorance, not without good reason, as one of the essential conditions of their own power. Weighted down by their daily labour, deprived of leisure, of intellectual intercourse, of reading, in short, of all the means and a good portion of the stimulants that develop thought in men, the people generally accept religious traditions without criticism and in a lump. These traditions surround them from infancy, in all situations in life, and artificially sustained in their minds by a multitude of official poisoners of all sorts. Priests and men are transformed therein into a sort of mental and moral habit, too often more powerful even than their natural good sense. There is another reason which explains and in some sort justifies the absurd beliefs of the people, namely the wretched situation to which they find themselves fatally condemned by the economic organization of society in the most civilized countries of Europe, reduced intellectually and morally as well as materially to the minimum of human existence, confined in their life like a prisoner in his prison, without horizon, without outlet, without even a future. If we believe the economists, their people would have the singularly narrow souls and blunted instincts of the bourgeoisie if they did not feel a desire to escape. But of escape there are but three methods, two chimerical and a third real. The first two are the dram shop and the church, debauchery of the body or debauchery of the mind. The third is social revolution. Here I conclude. This last will be much more potent than all the theological propagandism of the freethinkers to destroy to their last vestige the religious beliefs and dissolute habits of the people, beliefs and habits much more intimately connected than is generally supposed. In substituting for the at once illusory and brutal enjoyments of bodily and spiritual licentiousness, the enjoyments as refined as they are real of humanity developed in each and all of the social revolution alone will have the power to close at the same time all the dram shops and all the churches. Till then, the people, taken as a whole, will believe, and if they have no reason to believe, they will at least have a right. There is a class of people who, if they do not believe, must make at least some semblance of believing. This class, comprising of all the tormentors, all the oppressors, and all the exploiters of humanity, priests, monarchs, statesmen, soldiers, public and private finances, officials of all sorts, policemen, gendarmes, jailers and executioners, monopolists, capitalists, tax leeches, contractors, landlords, lawyers, economists, politicians of all shades, down to the smallest vendor of sweetmeats, all repeat in unison those words of Voltaire: if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. For you understand, the people must have a religion. That is the safety valve. There exists finally a somewhat numerous class of honest but timid souls who, too intelligent to take Christian dogmas seriously, reject them in detail, but have neither the courage nor the strength nor the necessary resolution to summarily renounce them altogether. They abandon to your criticism all the special absurdities of religion. They turn up their noses at the miracles, but they cling desperately to the principal absurdity at the source of all the others to the miracle that explains and justifies the other miracles, the existence of God. Their God is not the vigorous and powerful being, the brutally positive God of theology. It is a nebulous, diaphanous, illusory being that vanishes into nothing at the first attempt to grasp it. It is a mirage, an ignis fatuus that neither warms nor illuminates, and yet they hold fast to it and believe that were it to disappear, all would disappear with it. They are uncertain, sickly souls who have lost their reckoning in the present civilization, belonging neither to the present nor the future, pale phantoms eternally suspended between heaven and earth, and occupying the same position between the politics of the bourgeoisie and the socialism of the proletariat. They have neither the power nor the wish nor the determination to follow out their thought, and they waste their time and pains in constantly endeavouring to reconcile the irreconcilable in public life. These are known as bourgeoisie socialists. With them or against them, discussion is out of the question. They are too puny. But there are a few illustrious men of whom no one will dare to speak without respect, and whose vigorous health, strength of mind, and good intention no one will dream of calling into question. I need only to cite the names of Mazzini, Michelet, Quinet, John Stuart Mill, generous and strong souls, great hearts, great minds, great writers, the first, the heroic and revolutionary regenerator of a great nation. They are all apostles of idealism and bitter despisers and adversaries of materialism, and consequently of socialism also, in philosophy as well as in politics. Against them we must discuss this question. First, let it be remarked that not one of the illustrious men I have just named, nor any other idealist thinker of any consequence in our day, has given any attention to the logical side of this question without properly speaking. Not one has tried to settle philosophically the possibility of the divine salto mortal, of pure and eternal regions of spirit into the maya of the material world. Have they feared to approach the irreconcilable contradiction and despaired of solving it after the failures of the greatest geniuses of history, or have they looked upon it as already sufficiently well settled? That is their secret. The fact is that they have neglected the theoretical demonstration of the existence of a God, and they have developed only its practical motives and consequences. They have treated it as a fact universally accepted, which as such no longer susceptible of any doubt whatever, for sole proof thereof limiting themselves to the establishment of the antiquity and this very universality of the belief in God. This imposing unanimity in the eyes of many illustrious men and writers, to quote only the most famous of them who eloquently expressed it, Joseph de Maistre and the great Italian patriot Giuseppe Mazzini, is of more value than all the demonstrations of science. And if the reasoning of a small number of logical and even very powerful but isolated thinkers is against it, so much the worse, they say, for these thinkers and their logic for universal consent. The general and primitive adoption of an idea has always been considered the most triumphant testimony to its truth. The sentiment of the whole world, a conviction that is found and maintained always and everywhere, cannot be mistaken. It must have its root in a necessity absolute inherent in the very nature of man. And since it has been established that all peoples, past and present, have believed and still believe in the existence of God, it is clear that those who have the misfortune to doubt it, whatever the logic that led them to this doubt, are abnormal exceptions, monsters. Thus then, the antiquity and universality of a belief should be regarded, contrary to all science and all logic, as sufficient and unimpeachable proof of its truth. Why? Until the days of Copernicus and Galileo, everybody believed that the sun revolved about the earth. Was not everybody mistaken? What is more ancient and more universal than slavery? Cannibalism, perhaps. From the origin of historic society down to the present day, there has been always and everywhere exploitation of the compulsory labor of the masses, slaves, serfs, or wage workers, by some dominant minority, oppression of the people by the church and by the state, must it be concluded that this exploitation and this oppression are necessities absolutely inherent in the very existence of human society? These are examples which show that the argument of the champions of God proves nothing.
Power off.
Nothing, in fact, as is universal or as ancient as the iniquitous and absurd truth and justice. On the contrary, are the least universal, the youngest features in the development of human society. In this fact, too, lies the explanation of a constant historical phenomenon, namely the persecution of which those who first proclaimed the truth have been and continue to be the objects at the hands of the official and privileged and interested representatives of universal and ancient beliefs, and often also at the hands of the same masses who, after having tortured them, always end up by adopting their ideas and rendering them victorious. To us materialists and revolutionary socialists, there is nothing astonishing or terrifying in this historical phenomenon. Strong in our conscience, in our love of truth at all hazards, in that passion for logic which of itself alone constitutes a great power and outside of which there is no thought, strong in our passion for justice and in our unshakable faith in the triumph of humanity over all theoretical and practical bestialities, strong finally in the mutual confidence and support given each other by the few who share our convictions, we resign ourselves to all the consequences of this historical phenomena, in which we see the manifestation of a social law as natural, as necessary, as invariable as all the other laws which govern the world. This law is logical, inevitable consequence of the animal origin of human society, for in the face of all the scientific, physiological, psychological and historical proofs accumulated to the present day, as well as in the face of the exploits of the Germans conquering France, which now furnish so striking a demonstration of, it is no longer possible to really doubt this origin. But from the moment that this animal origin of man is accepted, all is explained. History then appears to us as the revolutionary negation, now slow, apathetic, sluggish, now passionate and powerful, of the past. It consists precisely in the progressive negation of the primitive animality of man by the development of his humanity. Man, a wild beast, cousin of the gorilla, has emerged from the profound darkness of animal instinct into the light of the mind, which explains in a wholly natural way all his past mistakes and partly consoles us for his present errors. He has gone out from animal slavery and passing through divine slavery, a temporary condition between his animality and his humanity. He is now marching on to the conquest and realization of human liberty, whence it results that the antiquity of belief of an idea, far from proving anything in its favor, ought, on the contrary, to lead us to suspect it. For behind us is our animality, and before us our humanity, human light, the only thing that can warm and enlighten us, the only thing that can emancipate us, give us dignity, freedom and happiness, and realize fraternity amongst us, is never at the beginning, but relatively to the epoch in which we live, always at the end of history. Let us then never look back. Let us look ever forward, for forward is our sunlight, forward our salvation. If it is justifiable and even useful and necessary to turn back to study our past, it is only in order to establish what we have been and what we must no longer be, what we have believed and thought, and what we must no longer believe or think, what we have done and what we must do nevermore. So much for antiquity. As for the universality of an era, it proves but one thing, the similarity, if not the perfect identity of human nature in all ages and under all skies. And since it is established that all peoples at all periods in their life have believed and still believe in God, we must simply conclude that the divine idea and outcome of ourselves is an error historically necessary, the development of humanity, and ask why and how it was produced in history, and why an immense majority of the human race still accept it as a truth.